Welcome back to Placeology. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Megan.
And in this video, we're counting down our ranking of the 10 best skylines in the United States. Now, when we say best skylines, I'm sure many of you already have a few pictured, but be sure to stick around to the end because we may just surprise you with our choices.
Now, before we jump in, we want to recognize our honorable mentions that we loved but didn't quite make the cut of the top 10. Those cities are
Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Cincinnati, Ohio.
Nashville, Tennessee.
Baltimore, Maryland.
And Washington, D.C., which felt a little too unique to compare against the rest.
If you'd like to see another video where we get into these honorable mentions a little bit more, let us know in the comments. Now let's get into our list.
Number 10 on our list is Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm sure you're wondering why it made the cut over some of our more well-known honorable mentions, and it's because there is just something special about the Charlotte skyline that gives it an edge. While so many skylines are filled with boring boxes, almost every building in Charlotte's skyline has an architecturally interesting element that makes it recognizable. And as you'll see with many of the cities on our list, the skyline at night is just as interesting, with colorful lights on nearly every building. I remember driving through one October and being impressed by how well the city lights were coordinated to the color pink for Breast Cancer Awareness Month, more so than even most larger cities are able to pull off.
The two tallest buildings in Charlotte are responsible for some of these lights: the Bank of America Corporate Center with an interesting crown, and the angular building formerly called the Duke Energy Center. The Bank of America building is the tallest in the city and has been for over 30 years, and in fact, 3 of the city's 10 tallest buildings, as well as the NFL Stadium, bear the Bank of America name, which isn't too surprising considering it is the second largest bank in the U.S., but is headquartered in the 16th largest city. 2 other banks, Truist and Wells Fargo, also occupy some of the tallest buildings in Charlotte and contribute to the nighttime lights. To take it all in, we recommend the view from the Central Avenue Bridge, an overpass above a convergence of highways that gives a sweeping view of the skyline.
Number 9 on our list is Cleveland, Ohio, a skyline that reaps the benefit of natural beauty with its location on Lake Erie. Now, we took natural beauty with a grain of salt when making our list, 1 because we wanted to keep the focus on the architecture of the cities, and 2 because it may unfairly lift up a city like Denver, which has the gorgeous backdrop of the Rockies but isn't memorable at all as a skyline. So with that said, Cleveland makes the list not just because of the lake, but because of the varied building styles that make up the skyline, as well as the history of the iconic Terminal Tower.
The Terminal Tower may only be the second tallest building in Cleveland today, but when it was completed in 1927, it was the second tallest building in the entire world. This wasn't just a fluke either. Outside of New York City, the Terminal Tower was the tallest building in North America for almost 40 years. Cleveland joins only Chicago and New York City on this list as cities with such a long history of building tall. The Terminal Tower was surpassed by the Key Tower in 1991 as the tallest in Cleveland, but it's still an icon of the city, lit up colorfully at night and the brightest in the skyline. Other tall buildings of note include the former BP Tower and the Erie View Tower, as well as a Sherwin-Williams headquarters that's under construction that will be the 4th tallest when completed.
Cleveland may be one of the smaller skylines on our list, but there's no shortage of vantage points to see it from. The most famous probably being Edgewater Park, where you can pose with the skyline in front of one of 3 Cleveland script signs. The other 2 signs are great views too, though, and the North Coast Harbor location adds in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to the skyline.
We've ranked Pittsburgh number 8 on our list. We love Pittsburgh's skyline because it just feels so different from many other more imposing skylines. This one is not nearly as tall, but does have a density and variety of heights that are really pleasing to the eye. Something else that makes Pittsburgh's skyline unique is the topography, where the Allegheny and Monongahela rivers meet to form the Ohio River. This makes Pittsburgh's skyline fit within a neat triangle. It's these same rivers that necessitate another visually interesting part of Pittsburgh's skyline, the bridges. In fact, Pittsburgh is known as the City of Bridges, and with the 2006 study noting that Pittsburgh had a total of 466 bridges, it is aptly nicknamed. The Fort Pitt Bridge and the Fort Duquesne Bridge are probably the most prominent due to their close proximity to the confluence of the 3 rivers. The Fort Pitt Bridge especially stands out in Pittsburgh's skyline with its yellow double arches spanning the Monongahela River.
There are several buildings that make Pittsburgh's skyline unique, the tallest building of which is the U.S. Steel Tower, which upon completion in 1970 was the tallest building in Pennsylvania at 841 feet tall. This was surpassed in 1987 by the completion of One Liberty Place in Philadelphia. Another interesting building in Pittsburgh's skyline is the Ppg Building, which was designed in the Neo-Gothic style by prominent architects Philip Johnson and John Burgee, and completed in 1984. It is also the co-headquarters of the Kraft Heinz Company. Also of interest in terms of both height and design is Fifth Avenue Place, which utilizes an interesting pyramidal roof structure.
And as for our favorite vantage point, the Duquesne Incline and accompanying overlook in Mount Washington is a pretty magical place to spot it from.
Oh, Los Angeles. After considering spots up, down, and off the list altogether, LA lands here at number 7 on our list, and it's time to dig into why. So I think the biggest criticism of the LA skyline is that most people would expect something larger, possibly something more exciting. But the thing about LA is that despite being the second largest city and metro area in the country, it doesn't have the density of a crowded metropolis like New York. The result for our purposes is a skyline that's hardly distinguishable from any other average to large US city. But that doesn't mean it's any less interesting.
The tallest two buildings in Los Angeles are the Wilshire Grand Center and the U.S. Bank Tower, both 73-story buildings, which capture the most immediate attention when looking at the LA skyline. The Wilshire Grand is only taller on the technicality of antenna height, which makes it the tallest both in LA and on the West Coast. One of the most interesting things about Los Angeles' skyline, though, is how much it has changed over the last 10 to 15 years. About half of the 20 tallest buildings were built in that time, including the Wilshire Grand, and the list of buildings proposed or already under construction is massive.
One of the biggest reasons that we did decide to include Los Angeles' skyline on our list is the sweeping view that you can get of it from the mountains around LA. The view from the Hollywood sign, the view from Griffith Observatory, the view from Mulholland Drive, all spots with such an iconic city view that it would be impossible to pick just one. It may not be the most outstanding skyline out there, but for city nerds like us, LA certainly has a lot going for it.
Coming in at number 6, we head just up the California coast to the city by the bay, San Francisco. This one felt really natural to us, especially because San Francisco's hilly topography and location by the bay create a skyline that is likely one of the most iconic and well-known skylines in the country. The skyline has been featured in a number of pop culture references, most notably in the Full House opening theme, or in The Princess Diaries, Monk, or The Wedding Planner, among countless others.
The skyline is made up of a charming assortment of skyscrapers that are various heights and shapes, with the most outlandishly shaped building being one of San Francisco's most iconic, the Transamerica Building, a 48-story futurist skyscraper and the second tallest building in the San Francisco skyline, surpassed only by the Salesforce Center, which was completed in 2018. Other buildings, such as 181 Fremont and 555 California Street, also make a visual impact, and are worth noting as other buildings that make San Francisco's skyline great.
The geography of San Francisco gives several vantage points for a lovely skyline, but probably the prettiest view, in our opinion, is from the Bay Bridge, or just past it, if you also like having the view of the bridge included in the skyline. This vantage point gives perhaps the best view of the Transamerica Building and the various other buildings that make up the skyline. This is also perhaps the best any time of day, since it is both beautiful during the day and then glittering and gorgeous at night. Another great vantage point that is unique is from the Painted Ladies. This view is like that one that so many of us are familiar with from the Full House intro, with the beautiful Victorian-style homes in the foreground and the sprawling city and skyline off in the distance. Or, if you are a Golden Gate Bridge lover, the view from Battery Point is another iconic and awe-inspiring view, although some of those great skyscrapers do appear smaller than from some of the other vantage points mentioned here.
At number 5, we have Dallas, Texas. And if you haven't had the chance to visit Dallas, we get it. This one doesn't show up in the movies all the time. That doesn't make the skyline any less mesmerizing. When they say that Texas does it bigger, they must have meant the skyline too. Driving through the city at night sort of feels like being inside of Coruscant if you're a Star Wars fan.
The lighting used on the skyscrapers feels futuristic. One of the best examples of this is Reunion Tower, known locally as The Ball, which is one of Dallas's most recognizable landmarks, and is the city's 15th tallest building. It is often lit up in a number of colors. Other skyscrapers that make the skyline beautiful are Fountain Place, a 60-story late modernist skyscraper and the 5th tallest building in Dallas, the Bank of America Plaza, which is the tallest skyscraper in the city and 3rd tallest in Texas, and the JP Morgan Chase Tower, which is a 75-story skyscraper. Throw in the Margaret Hunt Hill Bridge with its twisted optical illusion-inducing cables, and you've got a recipe for skyline success.
For best vantage points, locals say that Trinity Overlook or the Perot Museum will give you those picture-perfect views, but I have to advocate for the view approaching the city on the freeway, with the skyline looming over in an otherworldly way.
At number 4, we have Chicago. With an iconic expanse of buildings that anyone could recognize immediately as the Windy City, we knew that this one would have to rank high on our list. During the day, the buildings along the skyline are various heights, massings, and materials that feel vibrant and are interesting to view. And at night, the buildings are lit in a way that feels inviting, and the lights of the city reflect on the water, creating a visually interesting display.
The Willis Tower, or formerly and more commonly known as the Sears Tower because nobody likes change, is the most recognizable and arguably most iconic building in the skyline. And of course, this is because it stands out. At a soaring 1,451 feet tall, it is the tallest building in Chicago, the 3rd tallest building in the United States, and was the tallest building in the world for over 20 years, from 1974 to 1998. and the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere until One World Trade Center, known as the Freedom Tower, was completed in 2013 in New York City. There's also the John Hancock Center, which is now just known by its address, 875 North Michigan Avenue. It's the 13th tallest building in the United States. There's also the Aon Center, a tall, boxy building, and the Crane Communications Building, which has a distinctive diamond-shaped roofline that's often lit up at night.
Interested in taking in this skyline? The best vantage point will depend on how close you want to be to it. For a close-up view, with the buildings looming over you, Grant Park may be a great location, whether you be at Cloud Gate, also known as the Bean, or over by Buckingham Fountain. Or for a more expansive view, the Adler Planetarium Skyline Walk is the perfect distance away. And of course, the planetarium is one of the best attractions in Chicago, so be sure to stop by that too for a good time learning about astronomy. If you're interested in seeing Skyline from an even further view away, Promontory Point in the Hyde Park neighborhood offers another fantastic view from afar.
If you've ever flipped on an episode of two long-running shows, Frasier or Grey's Anatomy, you'll instantly recognize the iconic skyline of Seattle, number 3 on our list. All 264 episodes of Frasier begin with the outline of Seattle, and most of Grey's Anatomy's 400-plus episodes include shots of the city from different angles. And we mention these things to show just how well-known the Seattle skyline is, and how embedded in American culture it has become as the symbol of the city in the Pacific Northwest.
Seattle is a little bit unique in that so much of the identity centers around one landmark, which is of course the Space Needle. You can take out the Empire State Building and know you're looking at New York, but is Seattle really Seattle without the Space Needle? The funny thing about this is that, on paper, the Space Needle doesn't sound that significant. It is only the 9th tallest structure in Seattle, and roughly only half the height of other observation towers like the CN Tower in Toronto and the Strat Tower, but it was the tallest structure west of the Mississippi when it was built for the World's Fair in 1962, and it sits away from most of the downtown Seattle buildings that have since dwarfed it, allowing it to shine brightly as the icon that it is. The distinction of the tallest building in Seattle, by the way, has belonged to the Columbia Center since 1985, although many large buildings are currently being proposed. One, tentatively, known as 4C, for 4th and Columbia, would become the new tallest building in Seattle if approved, though that is still up in the air for now. No pun intended.
If you're looking to marvel at the Space Needle and the rest of the Seattle skyline for yourself, there are so many great spots that it's hard to pick just one. Cary Park, Gasworks Park, and the Hamilton Viewpoint Park are all great options, and will give you the skyline against the natural beauty of Elliott Bay and Mount Rainier. This natural beauty, coupled with the cultural icon status of the Space Needle, propelled Seattle into the number 3 spot on our list.
Sneaking in for a surprise number 2 spot on our list is Las Vegas, Nevada. And before you come for us in the comments, hear us out. Sure, it doesn't have the history of Chicago or the big population of LA, but you can't deny the iconic, albeit flashy, nature of Las Vegas.
This gaudy, modern, sensory overload city is so unique in how it has become a must-visit destination for so many, a bucket list item, if you will, and is a distinctly American experience. In so many spots, the skyline contains a Vegas-ized take on iconic buildings and cultures from around the world, like the half-scale Eiffel Tower or the New York Hotel and Casino's mini New York skyline. Add in an observation tower as the tallest structure, a Ferris wheel, and a Romanesque Colosseum at Caesar's Palace, and it's easy to see why it deserves this lofty spot on our list.
No one building dominates the Las Vegas skyline. The tallest building is the Fontainebleau Hotel, but it only beats out the next tallest building by a few dozen feet, and several of the top 10 are only feet away from each other. Most of the buildings are concentrated on the famous Las Vegas Strip, which is separate and stretches to the south of actual downtown Las Vegas.
Above all else, the most impressive aspect of the Las Vegas skyline is the way that it lights up at night. If we were ranking this list by how impressive the skyline looks at night, Vegas might just inch up into that number 1 position, because the glitz and glamour can't be outshined. It's hard to even make a recommendation of where to view the skyline from, perhaps the observation deck of the faux Eiffel Tower, but the way that we got the best view of the city at night is by plane. Flying into and out of the airport, now known as Harry Reid Airport and formerly known as McCarran Airport, which sits right next to the Strip, is truly the coolest way to take in all of the glitz and glamour.
And at number 1, you almost certainly guessed it. It's the city that never sleeps, New York City. There's a reason that we can all picture it so easily, and why on any given night you can probably find a TV show or movie panning between the beautiful buildings in the opening credits or between scenes. Sex and the City, Friends, Sleepless in Seattle, 2 Weeks Notice, Spider-Man, and that's only to name a small sampling.
The expanse of buildings is so breathtaking to take in. One, because of the sheer height of many of the buildings, but also because of the immense number of them. The density of Manhattan is one of the reasons that the skyline is so alluring. There are at least 97 buildings in New York City that are over 600 feet tall, which is a pretty impressive number in and of itself. Of these, there are some gems that are internationally known, and that we have to highlight when discussing why NYC's skyline is the best.
You have the Empire State Building, which was completed in 1931 and has since become a symbol for the city and an international cultural icon. It stood as the tallest building from 1931 to 1970, and then again from 2001 to 2013, due to the events of 9/11. The Empire State Building was surpassed by One World Trade Center in 2013, which is the main building of the rebuilt World Trade Center, situated beside the Ground Zero site. It is the tallest building in Manhattan and the Western Hemisphere, and the 7th tallest building in the world. Its sleek glass exterior and ultra-tall presence reflects much of the city around it, giving the building a quiet grace that announces the resilience of the city. Then there's the Chrysler Building, which was completed in 1930 and stood as the world's tallest building for 11 months before it was surpassed by the Empire State Building. Even today, it stands as the world's tallest brick building with a steel frame structure. It was built in the Art Deco style for the Chrysler Corporation and therefore has many interesting automobile-oriented features. But for the skyline, it has a beautiful glimmering alloy crown that has become just as iconic as the Empire State Building.
Other shorter but no less magnificent structures and skyscrapers dot Manhattan's skyline. The Woolworth Building, for example, is breathtaking in its own right, with its pyramidal roof and 4 ornamental tourelles crowning the building. It was the tallest building in the world at the time, and remained so until surpassed by the Chrysler Building in 1930. Even today, it is still one of the top 100 tallest buildings in the U.S. Likewise, bridges like the iconic Brooklyn Bridge or Manhattan Bridge add to the New York City skyline, making it all the more interesting. And depending on the angle that you approach the skyline, you may even be able to include the Statue of Liberty, another iconic structure that draws in onlookers.
Wondering what the best spots to take in the best skyline in America are? Our picks are the following: Weehawken, New Jersey, shout out to our fellow Hamilton fans, Brooklyn Bridge Park, the Staten Island Ferry, and Roosevelt Island.
All right, thanks for tagging along as we rounded